All right, thank you for joining us today. And today is our finish of our first part. I call it the history of Greco-Roman philosophy. And I realized I should put more on the Roman because original plan I only put to Marcus Aurelius. Okay, so I don't think that's good. So I'm going to expand a little bit to at least to the St. Augustine, include the Christian philosophy, which also interesting. So I decide probably I want to take a break for a few weeks to 1 or 2 months. And during this time, I probably want to think about what would be the best way to do. And I probably will start another reading club, reading group. I think some people has been in my Bertrand Russell reading. And then I probably pick another book to as a reading, and then that would be easier for me, so I don't have to prepare much material. So we just read all together, and everybody share. So kind of happy hour, this kind of thing. So that's the idea. And welcome to send me any information or any idea you like, or if you want to join me or our group, and as a host or facilitator, or you are welcome. And then I am very happy to have everybody work together. And that would be the idea. So before I start, is any question or any comment before I start? Today will be supposedly will be finished all the Greek. Okay, so we have been through a lot, and then we should finish Greek, and then sometime, probably 1 month or 2 months or beginning of next year, I will start the Roman philosophy. James, please.
Yeah, I'd not read the fragments before, so this was really exciting for me. I didn't finish them, but I feel very strongly about these two philosophers. So it's,
I think that
hope it'll be interesting.
I'm glad that you talk about this. And then if you remember, Bertrand Russell said that that's probably the best philosopher, during the Greek time. And after Democritus, and the philosophy is going to decline. And I think he meant Plato and Aristotle. So we will read this part. So let's start, and for today's, and then. So we don't have a lot of people. So if you have, I think how many people we have? We only have 14, so that's great. So if you have a question or anything you want to talk about, you can just jump in, or you can raise your hand. So first, we have gone through all this, and then that's my schedule to do the part 2 for the Roman philosophy. So today we are here. We have been through the Plato, Aristotle, and we go to the Ionian side, and we go to the southern Italian side. And today we go back to Greek, and then we are going to deal with Democritus and Epicurus. Okay. So that's the just quick overview what we have done. So we already go through all the Q1. Then today we will deal with Democritus and Epicurus, which is around the same time of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And then when we start the Roman, we will start from Lucretius, and Lucretius is kind of like a conclude Democritus and Epicurus. So that would be a good starting point. So again, when we talk about Greek, we are not talking about only this area, right? We're talking about all the non-Greek words, which include the Asian Minor on this side, and also on the southern Italy, including Sicily. And when we talk about Roman, we couldn't talk about the Roman. It's on this side. It's not in the map, but we are going to talk. And the key difference is all the writing, they speak Greek, And when we talk about Roman philosophy, they speak Latin. So that's the difference. So that's the, I put the list on all the philosophy up to here, right? That's our, for today. So I just like to give a quick review. Since this week is the 10th week, so I would like to give a quick review for what we have go through for the last 10 weeks. So we spent about 6 weeks talking about Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And then we talk about the Milesian philosophy, which is on Asia Minor, on this side, on Malaysia. Basic is Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. So they are scientists, and instead of using mythology to explain the natural phenomena, they use logo. They use their experience, and the basics. They have the concept of arche, and then mentioned us, told us it's kind of like a beginning point. So everything starts from there, and then we know Thales talk about water, Anaximanders talk about Aperon, and Anaximenes talking about the air. So then we also, I think a few weeks ago,
may I interrupt?
Yes, Adam, please.
Thank you. So this is, the real question is, you put down that they were empiricists, and it seems like only sort of, right? I mean, they made a lot, these early philosophers made a lot of assumptions about the world, but they didn't really go out and check their assumptions. So if they would have checked their assumptions, we would call them the first scientists, not the first philosophers, right? So there's just lots of stuff that they made. So I certainly agree they thought they could work things out through reason.
Yeah,
but it seems like what they were lacking was really that.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, I just put, do I put as empiricism? I think yes, I think this one is kind of debatable, okay, because I just want to make it easy to distinguish from the other side. They are technical word, we should say they are more empirical, okay, than on the people on the Italian side. You know, on the Italian side, they are more.
It seems to me their big breakthrough is just saying that I can use my own reason to think things through, and I don't have to rely on myth. That was huge, and it's something no one else anywhere in the world was doing, right? Till much later.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Adam.
I mean, I think Alan has a good point here, but I would say, just to add one thing here, that there's a sense in which it's not just reason, because they do cite empirical evidence or, you know, phenomena that support their view. Now, the one thing, it's not terribly scientific, because sometimes it's sort of a, well, my theory explains why such and such happens. And so if my theory is right, then it happens. But of course, you can have multiple theories that explain why something happens. And you need a more rigorous kind of testing to see which one, if there's competing explanations for the same phenomenon, which they often have, because one person will give this account of why you know, eclipses happen or something, and somebody else comes up with another one. Well, how do you decide between those two? That's when when you need real rigorous empirical testing, and they don't seem to quite get that. It's more of a, you know, my theory is cool because it explains blah, 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 but it's not a rigorous test. But there is the general idea that by hypothesizing something, you can account for phenomena. And the crucial thing to me often is that whatever their phenomena are, they're always at least alleged natural processes. It's not Zeus is angry, so he's throwing thunderbolts kind of thing. There's this wind in the cloud and that causes the thunderbolts or something like that. It's always some kind of, at least presumptively, natural phenomenon explaining some other natural phenomenon, and without appealing to some kind of mysterious or mystical account of what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah, please.
Jason, we have a call-in user. Should I go ahead and admit him?
Yeah, you just admit and then watch it. So,
yeah. Thank you.
So you make your call. Yeah.
And are we going to use hands in this meetup, or is it?
I think right now, please use hand, because look, guys, we have almost 20 people. So let's use hand. Okay. So thank you, everyone, and we have to change our rules. And thank you, Dan, for give us a deep explanation. But I just want to remind everyone, because these people are 2,500 years ago, so we should give them some credit. Call them scientists, probably not correct in today's sense, but for 20 people in 2,500 years ago, I think they are pretty advanced around the world. So Heraclitus, we also talk about this. Remember, this was just a quick review, and just to remind you, Heraclitus also happened talking about everything is becoming, and his famous saying is, you cannot cross the same river twice. And I know Dan have different opinion on this writing, but just remind, he is talking about everything is change, and the basic thing he talk about is fire, becoming, so-called the doctrine of perpetual flux. So then we moved on the other side. I think we mentioned last week to the Italian side, and they are different, right? So basics, we talk about Parmenides and Zenos and Melissus, which has been considered as ideatics. Okay, so they are more mystical, and instead of talking about becoming, they are talking about being. So example is Parmenides, right? Parmenides is, let me do this one. So basics, just give a quick review on the Parmenides, right? So basics, he is taking the three assumptions, which the Greek word agree. The number one is nothing can come from nothing, or nothing can disappear into nothing. And number two, they believe they have one reality. Number three is talking about whatever really exists is identical with whatever properties it really is. I think that means during that time, Greek doesn't separate the properties and the materials. In another word, they don't separate the coldness and ice, iceness, or you say hotness, burningness, okay, with fire. So they don't have the different concept of property and the materials. So based on these three common beliefs, Parmenides, based on his logic, he draw a conclusion: the real world is one changeless, motionless, solid, finite, ungenerated, indestructible sphere, and that whatever we see change and the becoming is just illusion. So in his writing, he basically talking about everything is not change. For the immortals, okay, we will see, immortals will see the real reality. And for mortals, our common people, what we see, we use our senses. So only thing we see is change, which is not real. So that's Parmenides' idea, which he is respond to Heraclitus talking about becoming. So from here, we will see they have the pre-Socratic philosophy, they have the two kind of general idea, right? On the Asian Minor side, in general, is more scientific, more empirical, and talking about change, becoming. And on the Italian side, okay, basics, they are more mystical, or sometimes I think Bertrand Russell call it, how do you call it? Orphism, right? Okay, so a more mystical on this on the Italian side. And the Parmenides idea, basics is response to Heraclitus' philosophy. So if we go through, so everybody, so during this world, let's talk about during the time we have in the Greek world, they have Heraclitus on one side, and which is talking about becoming, and then they also have Parmenides on the other side, which talk about being, nothing change. So how are we going to consolidate this kind of philosophy? Because both are correct. So we come with a few, the Greek come with a few solutions, and we can pick up the two different solutions. One is Epicurus, which is he is in Epicurus. Epicurus is on here. Let me show the map. Is here. Epicurus is here. So on the Sicily, okay, on this side. So you can imagine he will be more close to the Parmenides idea. So in this way, you will see his idea. He tried to improve Parmenides' idea to explain why things change. So he got the idea of, it's not his invention, but basically he considered the entire world instead of one solid sphere, okay, and a changeless sphere. He's talking about four elements: earth, air, fire, and the water. And the driving force for these four elements is the love and the strife. So basics, he composed this world as four elements, and they are changed through love and the strife. And then they put the Greek god over there, like Zeus is air, Hera is earth, Adonis, which is Hades, is fire, and Nestis, which is wife of Hades, is Persephone, is water. So his view is also talking about, let me see this one, let me show it. So his view of the universe is a cyclical world, right? So he basically is talking about the world is changed from the pure love, which has no life. Then they have the contention between love and the strife and the four elements. That's you have the presence of life. And then when the strife, control everything, so that's the end. And then again they have life. So it's a cyclical world. So he start to think about this world, and you can see Empedocles is trying to explain, okay, based on Parmenides.
I know how to fuck you if I fucked 100 bitches. You think if I fucked 100 bitches, I don't know what I'm gonna do?
Okay, just 1 minute.
Bitches don't even want to think when they fuck. If you get like show any hesitation, or if you don't know how to like bob and weave while they're not, I'm not having sex with you.
I found him. Yeah.
Found it? Okay, Sneeko?
Yeah.
You remove him?
Remove.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
So
I had a hard time.
Yeah, we average like one every week. So okay, so basically that's his idea is a cyclical universe and going through the change, and you can see that's the way he try to improve.
If you're still wearing a mask now, you're a bot.
I don't know what happened.
You're a fucking bot. You weren't wearing it before, and you're doing it now. You have 3 boosters. What the fuck are you doing? What?
Okay. He probably had a few accounts here.
Yeah, that's right. He came in twice.
Yeah, he came in twice. Okay.
And I did ban him. So
that looked pre-recorded for some reason. Like the guy wasn't live.
Oh yes, thank you.
That's good to record it because so everybody know. Okay, so okay, let's move on. And another thing, that's a little bit about the Empedocles, okay, other than his scientific view, he also considered himself as immortal, as God. So he walked among the, he talked about he walked around among the people, and then he talked about he started to talk about the soul, okay, and then he talked about the cycle of soul must wander 10,000 seasons. That means 10,000 years, and for 3 times. So I think if you remember Plato's Phaedrus, right, it's talking about the reincarnation, the soul will reborn. So that kind of idea has been created during this time. So that's the Empedocles. Okay. So on the other side is Anaxagoras. Okay. So basically they are the same time, and you can imagine Anaxagoras also try to explain what's going on in this world with Parmenides and Heraclitus. And Anaxagoras' idea basics is talking about, you can imagine he's more scientific because he's on the Asia Minor side. So he's talking about, instead of talking about 4 elements, he's talking about seed, which is everything in everything. So that means if you see a tree, they have the seed of tree. You see the paper, you have the, a seed of paper, and everything in everything. So that's why you can explain, right? So when you eat bread, and your body will grow, because bread also include the seed of your body. So you will reorganize. So you will grow. And then this kind of idea has been come out. So in today's world, we may say, oh, it kind of like a DNA or something. Okay. So you can see these two kind of explanation coming on during this time around 500. I think we will assume like Socrates' time, and then I think is Dan told me Anaxagoras also met Socrates and teach Socrates. So basically, before we move on, and that's like a quick review on what's going on before, okay, today's subject. So if you see this map, basics, we look at during this time, you will see 2 sides, right? On the Asia Minor side, we have Anaxagoras, and on the Italian side, you will see the Empedocles, and which both of them try to explain what's going on in this world. So I think that's the situation. And before we start, so I will pause for a few minutes or 1 minute if you have any comment or any. Oh, Ben, please.
Yeah, thanks. That's really nice. And the one thing I want to talk about just a little bit is it seems, in fact, to go back to the question about the scientific nature that Alan brought up earlier, it's my view that you actually get the first correct scientific discoveries with, actually, ironically, Parmenides and Anaxagoras. I mean, Parmenides, of course, is known as the guy who, kind of criticized all his quasi-scientific predecessors and so forth. But he was a pretty smart guy for all of that. And after the part where he explains that what is and there's no change, etc., he provides an alternative cosmology of his own, the way of opinion or whatever. And he makes actually 3 points that are all pretty brilliant, that nobody, with all the sort of scientific hypothesizing before him, nobody had come up with. And they are that the Earth is spherical. All his predecessors had a flat Earth, and many of his successors had a flat Earth. But he posited a spherical Earth. We don't know why. We don't have the passage. We just have a report. but it caught on. And by the time of Plato and Aristotle, it became standard. Also that the morning star is the evening star, Venus, which was known to the Babylonians for about 1,000 years before this, but the Greeks didn't have a clue. And it's pretty obvious Parmenides didn't get it from the Babylonians. He figured this out for himself. And the other one was that the moon gets its light from the sun. And those are all very brilliant. We actually have fragment 14 and 15 report that. So he gives the reason, at least a basic reason why, that the shiny part of the moon is always facing the sun there. And so he makes these three really discoveries that are very important. And now the next step is just that most historiography gives the report that after Parmenides, everybody after Parmenides, all the cosmologists after Parmenides were desperately trying to save scientific philosophy from the devastating attack by Parmenides. But I don't think that's true, because if you read them, and if you go back to the Anaxagoras page, there's one of the passages that shows this. Anaxagoras and Empedocles never disagree with Parmenides, and they agree with him. And he says that, is there one? Anyway, he says that there is no coming to be in perishing. Well, that's Parmenidean doctrine, and he's agreeing with that. And Empedocles says the same thing. And so what they have is these sort of permanent realities, these kind of elements, if you will, that are always there, like the four elements of Empedocles. They don't come to be, they don't perish, they intermingle with each other and produce temporary compounds, if you will. But they are always different, they are always there. Now that's actually taken from Parmenides' own cosmology. He posits two realities, light and night, that mix together and produce all the things that are. But the main point here, not to go on too long, but the main point here is that it looks like Empedocles and Anaxagoras are both agreeing with Parmenides, because they read the second part of the poem as the sort of application of the first part. In other words, if you want to do a cosmology, this is how you do it. You have changeless realities that combine and separate to produce temporary states of affairs. And of course, I think that's true of Leucippus, also the founder of atomism. And so you get all of these people who see Parmenides as the kind of providing the model for how to do cosmology right, not how to destroy cosmology, but how to do it right. They might be misreading him, but if they are, you still have to admire Parmenides, because he's such a brilliant scientist at that level. And then Anaxagoras goes along, and you mentioned lunar eclipses there, but to me, he doesn't have some invisible bodies there that can cause them, but he also gives the correct account. And it's pretty clear he uses Parmenides' insight. If the moon is a dark, opaque body about the apparent size of the sun, and it gets its light by reflection from the sun, when it disappears at the time of the new moon, it's because it's lurking near the sun, and you're just seeing the shadowed part of the moon. Now, if it should happen to get in the way of the sun, it would produce a solar eclipse. Well, he draws those conclusions and says solar eclipses are caused by the moon getting in the way of the sun, lunar eclipses by the earth blocking the sun's light to the moon. And he gets it right. And so suddenly, you've got an incredible breakthrough in astronomy that nobody else in the world ever figured out. The Babylonians were, and I think the Chinese too, were much better observers of the heavens, but they weren't as imaginative, if you will. And the Greeks came up with a lot of wrong answers, but when they got the right one, everybody knew it. And suddenly there are no new, up to this time, there are all these different theories of eclipses and of lunar light. But after Anaxagoras and Parmenides, there are no new theories. They just keep repeating the same ones. And you get Aristotle quoting that as a piece of good science. This is how science works. And he tells you Anaxagoras' theory of eclipses and so forth. So again, you have to admire Parmenides as whatever he thought, even if he thought he was putting out an impossible theory, it was so much better than anybody else's that suddenly everybody latched onto it and started realizing this really works.
All right, thank you, Dan. Yeah.
Next we have Mark H.
Yeah, Mark, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for your excellent overview there. It corresponded with everything I knew, and I learned a bunch of stuff that I did. So that was really nice. And I wanted to ask Dan. He said that the knowledge of the identity of the morning star and the evening star couldn't have come. He couldn't have learned it from the Sumerians. I'm wondering why Dan says that. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, the fact. Let me just say this very briefly. The Babylonians had these kind of almanacs of what the future, when Venus would be where, etc. And you couldn't even read those. The Venus was Ishtar in Babylon. I don't know Babylonian actually, but I know that much. It's the name that the Greeks borrowed from the Babylonians when they named the planet Aphrodite, and the Romans called it Venus. But so the planet Ishtar, to read the chart, you had to know that sometimes Venus appears in the morning and sometimes it appears at night, and so on. It's just part of the whole explanation of how everything works there. But the Greeks didn't have a clue about this, and it happened. Parmenides is writing about the time of the Persian invasions of Greece, when there wasn't a lot of friendly interactions between the Mesopotamia and Greece, and so it would. He wasn't particularly close to Asia Minor either, where they might have had access to this, but he's all the way over in Italy, so it's not very likely that he got that from there. But I think it takes the same kind of knowledge to recognize that the moon, whether it's appears in the morning sky or the evening sky, and whether the shiny part, the crescent part of the crescent moon is always facing the sun, and it's sort of the same set of insights that makes you realize both of those truths there.
All right, thank you, Dan. Mark, did you get the answer?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Okay, so so far we done the pre-Socratic, let's put it this way. And then let's move on to today's subject. And the basics, just like Dan explained very well on the situation, everybody had to respond to what the Parmenides said. Okay, it's correct. And then then we have the different response on that. And right now we will see another response, a kind of response to this situation. And I think, well, a lot of people think so, and at least I believe this way. Democritus, okay, is Danish pronounced as Democritus or Democritus?
Democritus is the traditional.
Okay, Democritus. Okay, I see somebody called the Democritus.
Just to explain how this happens, you rewrite the Greek names in the Roman alphabet, and then you use Roman rules of accentuation to determine where the accent goes, which is not the same as the Greek accent.
Okay.
So traditionally, most people got it from Latin, and that's
okay. Okay, I'm going to call it the Democratic. That's what I used to call. Okay. So basics, the Atomist. Okay. is Leucippus and Democritus. And then we know probably nothing about Leucippus. And then basics, I think Democritus is a prolific writer, but unfortunately, most of his writings are lost. So we only have a few fragments left. And that's why I posted the reading on that. And then, so we will see the Democritus is in this area, in the Apodora, in this is the north part of continent. So basics in my his great invention is atom, okay, and in the Greek words means uncuttable. So and he's around the same age as Socrates. So I'm not sure it's fair to call him pre-Socratic philosopher. But anyway, he probably in the same time as Socrates. So his idea, atom, okay, of course, it's not true to call him a scientist discovered the atom, but it's fair to call him the atomic hypothesis, and it's a postulation. Okay? So with this kind of explanation, he can explain, okay, without violate Parmenides' idea of philosophy, and he can explain what's going on in this world. If we look at, I think that he is in a way to improve Anaximander philosophy, because Anaximander talk about seed, talk about everything in everything. In this way, it's too costly, because for the tree, they have the seed of tree, and how do you know that's a dog or a piece of meat? Then they have the seed of meat. For the hair, they have the seeds of hair. So it becomes infinite. So it can explain things, okay? But you have to explain why people eat bread, and the kids will grow up, and you will grow your hair. So you must, so that means the bread must contain something, will help you grow hair. And Anaxagoras' idea would be, okay, everything in everything. So bread also have included the seed of meat, of hair, of everything. So when you eat bread, in some process, you grow your hair, you grow up. So this kind of explanation, it worked, but it's too expensive, put this way. You have to, so many things. So Democritus' idea would be, if something indivisible, okay, which is atom, he called it atom. So basic atom is homogeneous, it's solid, it's infinitely hot because it's indivisible. And then it's only different in shape and the size. So they have the many kind of atoms, and they have the different shape, different size, and they are uncreated, they are indestructible. So they're always there. And they have no color, no taste, no flavor. Okay. So, and another thing he has to invent it, which is different than the previous philosopher or one called scientist, is he believes they have void. Okay. Remember, Parmenides doesn't think they have a void, and that he had to create a void. With void, then you can move around, right? So you don't have to deal with the motion, the change, becoming. It's just illusion, because you have a void, you have a space, so the atom can move. So, and here leads to a great breakthrough in Greek philosophy or Greek science, because they start to separate the properties and the materials, right? So the property is the combination of atom, which will start to separate from the material itself. And then he talked about the motion. So it's two kinds of motion. One is vortex motion, which the bigger atoms will go into the center, and the lighter one will go into the periphery. And another motion called the hooking onto each other. So the same kind of atom will stick together. So right now, instead of using the everything in everything, like Anaxagoras explanation, or use 4 elements plus love and the strife to explain in this word, he used atom to explain this word. And then one more step he talked about is the soul. He believes soul is a material soul. So the soul is made of the fine and the sphere atoms. And the reason he made this one is he is talking about the sensation. So he talked how the thing we see in his writing, he talked about sweet exists by convention, bitter by convention, color by convention. So here he's talking about convention, he's talking about our sensation, which is subjective quality. So how can we taste something sweet? Because the combination of the atoms and the shape of atoms. And when the atom touch our tongue, we start to taste sweet. So in this way, he separates the properties and the materials, and he also can explain our sensation. So that's the achievement of Heraclitus on the science. So I just briefly talk about his atomism. Okay. So in the contrast, you will see, if you remember, if you read Plato's Timaeus, Plato's explanation will be totally opposite to Democritus' explanation, right? He instead of going to atoms, Plato still used 4 elements, but he break down to the triangle, because we have to explain, right? How does water, air, and the fire, they will interchange. So Plato's idea is talking about they are combination of different triangles. So different triangle create a different kind of element, and then use this way to explain, and then he go further. So you will see Plato is pure mathematician, right? So everything is in geometry and eventually go to the form. So that's the difference on that. And in order to understand how great of Democritus, I kind of put on the history of atomic model here. So if you look at the Democritus, his atomic model, okay, created around 400, 500 BC, okay. So he talked about atoms, okay. It's just a hypothesis, a postulation, okay. And it takes us almost 2,000, over 2,200 years to John Dalton to create another model, okay, continue the atomic model, but John Dalton's with experiment. So in this case, we can call John Dalton's atomic model is more scientific. It's not just a postulation. He has doing some experiment. So his model basically talk about it's a ball with different size, with different density. Then we will need to take, then the developer improve, right? Thomson have the Putin, because he start to understand the charge, the negative electrical charge. So he has the, I think he call it the Putins. So basically it's the positive one item with some electron on that. And then we need a Rutherford, okay, created the, find out the nucleus, which because he discovered the radiation and then he know the nucleus. So that's a more modern model, and we take the Neil Bohr, right, to understand that we have the different energy level. So we know the electrons is orbit around in different orbit based on their energy level. And today, our model is Erwin Schrödinger's idea, basically the possibility, which the probabilities basically is the quantum model. So you will see the development and the atomic model today. So before we start to read some of the Democritus writing fragment, and I will pause for some comment and some questions if you like. No? Dan, please. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah, this shows what a powerful theory this was. It was proposed in the 5th century BC and continued all the way down. I would mention too that, I mean, I think Newton was in favor of atoms, and not that he had a particular model of it, but the atomic hypothesis was pretty pervasive for a lot of scientists for a long time. But the one thing, from what I understand, I've seen it argued that the atomic hypothesis was not proved until a paper by Albert Einstein in 1905 on Brownian motion. So it was actually proved in 1905, arguably, but not until then. And yet it was dominant. It came to dominate. The one thing that this doesn't show is how chemistry came to be totally dependent on this, because it became obvious in the with the Daltonian atom that compounds were created of certain like a molecule of water was going to consist of twice as much hydrogen as oxygen, and that kind of thing, where you had a fixed ratio of whole number ratio of atoms, of one kind of atom to another, and that could only be accounted for on the atomic hypothesis that chemistry, the chemical relationships could only be understood if there were atoms that were making up a molecule in some way.
So thank you, Dan. So Dan, since you are here, there's a question I'd like to ask you. Does Plato or Aristotle, are they mentioned about Democritus or this kind of model?
Well, actually, it's quite famous that Plato never mentions Democritus. And it looks like he's, boycotting him.
So if I can comment on that, that Socrates and Plato didn't find any value in the metaphysical and physical speculations. They thought the only good use of philosophy was for ethics. And ethics is sort of how to run a good society and all that, memory. And so he just wasn't interested in the physical stuff. And I used to think the exact opposite of that when I took philosophy in school. But now when I hear philosophers and I hear all the metaphysical bullshit that they sort of put out into the world, I think, well, maybe Plato got that right. So hopefully I haven't insulted anyone by that, but I can understand. There's an awful lot of philosophy I would consider bad philosophy relating to metaphysics, where people just make it up. And so I can sort of understand why he would have that prejudice. So yes, he did ignore all the metaphysics. Plato ignored all the metaphysics.
So I just put it a little stronger in the case of Plato. For instance, in the laws, Plato says some really, some things about certain kinds of natural philosophy that are sort of.
Do you want to go now, or
can you go and I'll catch up?
Mm-hmm. How are you going to catch up?
But
you're okay now, Dan. Yeah.
Okay. But Plato does talk about these sort of materialist philosophies that are really, really, bad for ethics and bad for everything. And so he does, again, he never names Democritus, but you kind of reading between the lines, you figure he's the one that he thinks is the worst person because there's no kind of higher order in the universe. It's just a mass of atoms flying around, and there's no justice or goodness or forms of beauty and all that sort of stuff. Just there's no room for that in this materialistic theory. And so I do think Plato is pretty hostile. Plato, in the Timaeus, he makes some overtures to the right kind of natural philosophy, but that wasn't going to include materialism.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I believe during that time, the Greek so-called intelligentsia probably not very well, probably most of them probably believe, atom, or they are atomists. Yeah.
Well, next we have Mark H.
Yeah, Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks. I have 3 quick points and a question. The first one is somebody said that Leucippus never existed. I think it was Epicurus, but I could be wrong about that. But I think that most historians think that that's wrong. So I just wanted to mention that about Leucippus. The second one was, I'm glad Dan made the comment about Plato classifying Democritus as materialist, because my conception about the Ionic versus the Eleatic school is you're basically seeing the incipient division of philosophy that manifests in the modern world between materialism and idealism, between the Ionic and the Eleatic. And then the third thing I wanted to ask about was, has anyone, Jason or anyone else, investigated or heard of the possibility that the atomic theory came to Greece from India or vice versa? Because you have Canada in India, who's not hard to date, somewhere between like the 2nd and 6th century, who also has an atomic theory. And the elemental theories that develop in India are very similar to the Greek theories, as opposed to the Chinese elemental theories, which they're different from. The Greek and Indian elemental theories and atomic theories are very similar. In China, the elemental theory is quite different, and there's no atomic theory in China. So I was just wondering if anybody's investigated that.
Well, thank you, Mark. Okay, Jason, the next one will be Jason, please. Jason Benton.
Yeah, I had a question about where they get the idea of indivisibility. I mean, they realized at some point you couldn't divide things any further. So the question is similar to his other, but also I wanted to make the point that there were metaphysics involved in the aesthetics of Plato and Socrates to some extent. It's not that they were avoiding metaphysics.
All right, thank you, Jason. Anybody want to respond to this question?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
what I've seen of the Indian writings, some of the Vedas, I think they did presage the ideas that were popular in Greece, and the possibility that they originated prior to, and there was some, and they possibly influenced Greek thinking and language is, I think language is already a done deal. They already know that the language originated out of Proto-European, so from India. So it's possible that some of these early, even pseudo-religious or religious ideas penetrated Greek thinking to a certain extent, that they would have knowledge of things like the importance of the one, or the idea of the idea of atoms from in Indian earlier Indian religious thinking. And it's hard to actually place the exact date of some of the Indian manuscripts. They don't know when they were first, compiled, because the ones that we have were compiled at a later date. So, but it's very possible that a lot of the insights originated in India first.
All right, thank you. Thank you, James. Dan, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are interesting questions. The one thing, though, that, I mean, you can sort of see the rise of, account for, let's say you can account for the rise of atomism within the Greek theory by using Zeno's paradoxes. The idea of having a minimal entity, you know, the atoms, it's really tiny, but it's not infinitely divisible. It stops a certain kind of argument, you know, kind of the Zenonian regress, so that you can answer some of the problems of Zeno and so forth. And so I think that can be accounted for as a native development within there. And I would add one more thing that I've argued for elsewhere too, that in some ways the atomic theory is the most Eleatic, the most Parmenidean theory of them all, because remember, Parmenides has two kinds of entity, two elements. There is light and night, and light is very fine and light in the sense of not heavy, and night is heavy and dense, etc. Now you take that insight and you say, let's push it all away. Let's make whatever is the heaviest, whatever is the, you know, the dense element, completely dense, so it's unpenetratable by anything else, and take the stuff that is complete, that's light and airy, and make it completely without any you know, density to it at all. Now you've got atoms in the void. And if you look at Aristotle's account of these theories, he says the atomists posit two elements. Okay, the two elements are atoms and void. Okay, two elements. Not now there are an infinite number of atoms, but there's only one kind of thing there. That's the, you know, stuff, the dense stuff, and then there's the light stuff. So you can, in other words, sort of deduce almost the arguments for putting those atoms out there from the dialectic within the Greek theory. Again, not to take away from the contributions of India and China and so forth, who had their own very vibrant theories. But I think the Greek, you can account for the Greek one solely. And let me just mention too, I have argued for the existence of Leucippus in a paper in the Oxford Handbook of Pre-Socratic Philosophies. It's called Leucippus's Atoms. But the argument there simply is that we have two separate cosmologies with different orders of planets, the moon and sun. And one of them is clearly Democritus's, and the other one is clearly Leucippus's. And if there's anything that's a sort of a fingerprint for any individual early Greek philosophy, it's having your own cosmology. And so it's a similar cosmology, but it's certainly not identical and has a different order of heavenly bodies. So it looks pretty clearly like Leucippus had his own theory there, and Democritus came along and elaborated. And of course, he was much more prolific. He wrote, 20 or 30 books, and a book being a roll, a papyrus roll, whereas Leucippus probably just wrote one, but nonetheless, he's a distinct person there, I think.
All right, thank you, Dan. So any other thing? Okay, I think we can, because we has no way to read all the democratic fragment. So I just post here. So if anybody want to talk about, and please raise your hand. I just highlight something I think that's interesting, put this way. So let me start it. Okay, James, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I completely love, this is the first time I've actually read this. I completely love Democritus's ethics. It seems to me so much more practical and realistic than anything I've read in Plato. He just comes, to the right points and states them very plainly. That men should either be good or imitate someone good. And that's a really good one. And in the 60s, when we get to the 60s, there's a number of really good ones I liked.
This one?
No. Well, number 60, it's better to examine one's own fault than those of others. I mean, it's almost a Christian virtue. Go on to this higher in the 60s, if you can.
I can't.
Can you? No, you can't. Oh, okay. So anyway, yeah. So those are men who have not learned reason. That's number 53. Nevertheless, live according to reason. So that's fate. In other words, whether you are reasonable or not as a person, you will live according to reason, because that's what happens in society. That's a Hegelian concept. It's not. I don't think that's anywhere in Plato. So that is fantastic. He's extremely advanced, much more advanced than Plato, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, James.
Thank you.
Anyone have any comment on his writing? The man complete enslaved to wealth can never be honest. So kind of, this kind of insightful message coming out. And then here, believes not everything, but only what is proved. So it kind of pressure produce ultimate. Okay, so I think some of the Epicurean idea is, you can find the source here. Talk about untimely pleasure produce unpleasantness. Right. So the man who loves nobody, loved by no one. And then he talked about physical beauty, and then people is for unless it's intelligence. And okay, this one, I think this one is important. He start to mention about the cause. Okay, so he's famously is talking about, I'd rather discover one cause than gain the kingdom of Persia. So I think the cause basically talking about is the necessity of okay. And then he start to separate the chance and the reason. So I think that's his you want to call it the metaphysics, or you want to call it the scientific method. Okay, that's his idea. And one of his famous thing is his argument on the, just like Dan talking about, we can see his source from Zeno, right? So his idea of the atomism. So when Zeno talk about you never reach the target, okay, he's talking about infinite dividable. So you never reach the target. But with Democritus' solution with atom, which is indivisible, that means to a certain point, you will reach the target. And here he started talking about the similar situation of the continuities. He talked about a cone, if you slice, right? And one adjacent to another one, if these two circles are identical, then you cannot be a cone, it must be a cylinder. But if they are different size, then how can it be the cone? It must be a step kind of shape. So he kind of posed this kind of question. So we will see his response or continuity from his idea is kind of response to Zeno's idea. So we have more on he also talked about education and then contemplation. Okay, so which is same topic as Plato or Aristotle is talking about, but in a different way. And the one I highlight here, he is talking about freedom of speech, right? And then he talk about miser. They work as if they are going to live forever. I think that's very interesting. He has some political idea. Basically, he talked about the poverty under, he supports the democracy, right? He talked about poverty under democracy is even better than prosperity under autocracy. And that's a few things. And he talked about courage, fortune, and justice. That's his topic. He just doesn't have, we don't have so, unlike Plato has so many writings on his writing. So I don't know, James, do you pay attention on this one? Do you like this idea? I posted some of
Which one, 272?
Yeah, some 276, something like, you know.
Oh.
I do not think one should have children. And he talking about, he has some strange idea. He talk about if you want to have children, you'd better adopt one from your relatives, because you can pick the one fit you can pick the good one. If you,
oh yeah, that's really smart. Yeah, I like it. I like it. As a matter of fact, it's societal. You know, in other words, a lot of this thinking is societal. It's obviously related to the ways things actually work. He cares about how things work. Yeah, there must be atoms, because that seems to be how matter is composed. And all the experiments kind of point towards that. And but maybe he's not a scientist in the sense of Bacon or something like that. You know, well, he'll say, you know, this is because I've proved it over and over or anything like that. But the idea that this wisdom is coming from a certain social existence. In other words, people in olden times, people actually created these extravagant dowry systems in order to get their daughters married correctly. Without it, you know, the family fortunes would not really go that well, and they still exist today in parts of the world. And you have and the problems with children. Well, problems educating children. Maybe there wasn't a uniform education system, and that's what he's talking about. So in other words, the parents, because of the style of child raising at that time, maybe he had this perception that if the risks are many is the key word. In other words, bad things are going to happen. The child is going to develop friends. You can't ensure that the friends are going to be good children or children from a good family or a bad family. And so this element of chance in raising a family was bothersome to him. But that doesn't indicate any kind of morality or immorality. It just basically is a commentary on the type of society that he thought existed in his region at that time, and but it also, there's a certain what do you call it? A certain selfishness in this comment about the family of a friend, because that is what it is like when you are a parent. Sometimes someone does show up at the door that is a little bit more polite than your own child. I think it even happened to me when I was a kid. We invited a friend of mine over for dinner, and the whole night I wasn't even allowed to speak. They only wanted to ask my friend questions, and so I was like eclipsed by the love of my parents for this other child who was my friend, and I was totally incensed and embarrassed. But I don't know if it was a life-changing event or anything like that, but this is the way people are. They care about virtue. And when somebody shows up that is virtuous, that's what they want. So I think that's kind of what Democritus as a thinker is pointing to here. The fact that you can't exactly count on your own children being good or bad. And maybe you just want to go somewhere else and borrow one because that might be, they might be better than what you're sort of blessed with, so to speak.
Thank you. Yeah. So actually, you don't see that's so strange. So basically,
I don't think it's strange at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your. So basically, let me summarize. So you think about his response to what going on during that time, right? So
right. In other words, but because realize in Athens they even had riots at a certain time in Athenian history.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think let me make sure. Okay. So I summarize this one because you can also see the Epicureanism idea in the even before the Epicurus, right? The Democritus also have some idea. You can see you should build poverty well, and he who lack is not wealthy, and he who does not lack is not poor. So this kind of solution has been, this kind of idea before Epicurus. He already have some Epicurean idea. So in other way, it's common. You can see the atomists or materialists always produce Epicureanism. James, you have more to say?
I just had one other that I wanted to mention that I really like. Number 63 is, it's not, I don't think you have it, but it's, oh, you do?
Oh, no, I jumped.
No,
okay,
so it's just one of my favorites. It's to pronounce praise on noble deeds is noble. For to do so over base deeds is the work of a false deceiver. So this is a commentary on deception, on people who deceive you by stating that something is good that is not actually good.
Okay.
In other words, good is a matter of opinion. People will say what is good about something that is not good, a false deceiver. So in other words, truth is relative to speech, to what people will be willing to say.
So, okay, so
this is not a Platonic idea. I understand that. All you Platonists might be really angry right now, but
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So here, okay, it happened in the same time, almost the same period of time of Plato, and just like Dan said, probably Plato boycott Democritus. So you will see, it's good to see a different view. And if you read the Bertrand Russell, which I think James and I will read this part, and the Bertrand Russell is really criticized, very harsh on Plato and Aristotle. So he considered, Bertrand Russell considered Democritus is a great philosopher during the Greek time. So it's the last of the Greek philosopher to be free from certain fault which vitiated all later ancient and medieval thought. So he is talking about, I think he's talking about Plato. So from this point onward, there are first certain seeds to decay, okay, in spite of previous unmatched achievement, and then gradual decadence. What is amiss, even in the best philosophy after Democritus, is an undue emphasis on man as compared with the universe. First come with skepticism, which he calls Socrates, with the sophist, and leading to the study of how we know rather than attempt to acquire fresh knowledge. Okay, he talked about the sophist, and come with Socrates, emphasis on ethics. Okay, so I think Alan talk about this, and with Plato, the rejection of the world of sense in favor of self-created world of pure thought. Okay, that's Bertrand Russell's criticized on Plato. Then he criticized Aristotle, the belief in purpose as the fundamental concept of science. So in spite of the genius of Plato and Aristotle, their thought has vices which prove indefinitely harmful. So basics, according to Bertrand Russell, I'm not saying that's the right thing, but I just like to share what Bertrand Russell thinks about the great Democritus as this atomist idea, but Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, okay, and they cause the problem, and their thought are vices which prove and harmful. And then probably in Bertrand Russell's view, that's why we take another 2,000 years to continue develop the atomic idea, which will benefit in the modern world. So I think we should stop here on the democratics, and we will, any comment on this Bertrand Russell's idea? And anybody agree, disagree on this?
Well, it seems as biased as you said, Jason. I don't quite get his. He doesn't make his point, the reasons for his point that clear. He tends to treat each philosopher lightly, according to and partially, right. So he doesn't talk about any of Democritus's moral ideas, but while he emphasizes the moral ideas of Plato when he treats Plato later quite a bit. So this is and actually if you remember his treatment of Aristotle is that Aristotle is like weak logic. He's like a weak logician compared to what he should have been. So it's just ridiculous. His points of view are just too egocentric.
Okay, thank you, James.
Mark.
Mark, you have.
Yeah, I want to agree with James a little bit, although I do think the History of Western Philosophy is one of the better books. Actually, I think it is probably the best book that I've seen as an overview of ancient Greek philosophy. But I agree with James that his treatment of a lot of the philosophers is kind of cursory and doesn't seem like he's super familiar with them. At least the one that I know the most about, I felt like his treatment was kind of ridiculous. But I also agree with Jason's points that he made overall. I'm sympathetic to Russell's views comparing the Socratics to Democritus. So I just wanted to add that. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Let's kind of go through the Epicurus. Okay, so Epicurus will be later than Aristotle. Okay, so but you can see kind of a continue from Democritus, and then later on the later time is Epicurus. Okay, and the Roman philosophy. Okay, so will be continue on this one. So basically, the key difference, the key developer of Epicurus, he treat pleasure as a goal. So basically talk about three needs of man: equanimity and the body health, and the how do you call it? Exigence of the life, the urgency of the life. So basically, Epicurus treat pleasure as the end, not just the means. So I think the few things we would like to make it clear is it will be the continuous from the hedonism, which is by Epicurus. We didn't talk about him, but I just make a rough distinguishing between different ideas. And when we talk about hedonism, basically we talk about pursuing the sensual pleasure. And when we talk about Epicureanism, we're talking about pursuing the overall happiness, eudaimonias. And then until the 18th century, British philosopher Jeremy Bentham talking about the utilitarianism, which he is talking about the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. And that is the measure of the right and wrong. So he brings the so basics Epicureanism is an ethical theory, and then put the pleasure or eudaimonia as the end. Okay, so during this later on when we talk about Roman philosophy, there's a two major thinking is, and I believe during that time in Roman, probably Epicureanism probably dominate the idea, because when we read the Stoic writing, they mention Epicurean a lot. So I think the easy way to separate Epicureanism and the Stoicism is both of them talk about virtue. But Epicureanism basically treats virtue as a means to the end of happiness. And the Stoicism kind of treats virtue as the end, not the means. So that's the way I distinguish different the idea of Epicureanism. So before the end, is anyone want to talk about the writing on the, we have some writing on the Epicurus. And I just mentioned some famous writing. He talked about the death is nothing to us, for the body, when it has been resolved into the element, has no feeling, and that which has no feeling is nothing to us. So then he talked about it is impossible to live a present life without living wisely and well and justly. So basically, he is put the present life together with wise and justice. So he talked about no pleasure is in itself evil, and then he talked about the limit, the desire, and he talked about the peace of mind, the justice full of disquietude, unlimited time and limited time of effort and equal amount of pleasure. I think his idea of pleasure is no difference. Basics only different in the magnitude. That's his idea of the, okay. So let me jump through and the justice, and we talk about law, justice. Okay, I think we can stop here, and then so basics we kind of finish the philosophy of Greek in the Greek time. Thank you, everyone. And then just provide a so-called a cheat sheet, okay? If you want to just get an idea, I think I have to admit, it's oversimplified, but that's what we have covered, right? If say this, basically, if you want to use one word to talk about him, it's water. And Anaximander, we talk about the apparel, which is boundless mist, right? And Anaximenes, we talk about air, and the Pythagoras, basically talk about number and the ratio, okay? And then Xenophanes talk about the God, and then Heraclitus becoming, Parmenides talk about the being, Anaxagoras talk about seeds, everything in everything, nous, and Zeno and Epicurus talk about four elements, and Leucippus and Democritus talk about atoms. So that's provide a summary of the all the Greek philosophy within one word. I hope that would be the easiest way to remind you on the, this one. So we have Mark and James. Mark, please.
Yeah, are you going to talk about Lucretius in another? In a different, because I thought we were going to come to Lucretius at some point. Are you going to talk
Lucretius,
about him later?
I will put him in the Roman philosophy.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
so
he's the kind of, I think reading Lucretius probably will better than read the Democritus and Epicurus, right? Because he quite kind of provides a good summary and write it in the point. I think that would be the great idea.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've read it a couple times. I love it.
Awesome. Oh, that'd be great.
I wanted to emphasize a point that you made, Jason, about Epicureanism, which I think is not widely known, is that Epicureanism was a huge phenomenon in the Roman Empire. I've read that there's like a couple 100,000 people at its height were living in Epicurean communities around the Mediterranean, and it was pretty much completely crushed and repressed later by the Christian Church. A lot of people don't know that Karl Marx had a doctorate in philosophy, and in his doctoral dissertation, he said that the Roman mind was dominated by three philosophies: Stoicism, Epicureanism, and skepticism. So he talked about the predominance of Epicureanism as well in ancient times, and it's left very little imprint in modern times compared to, say, Stoicism and skepticism. But I think that's significant to understand how big a phenomenon it was at the time. That's it. Thank you.
So, Mark, you said that there are the three major philosophy in the Roman time. Can you repeat that?
According to Marx, he says this in his doctoral dissertation: Stoicism, skepticism, and Epicureanism were the dominant philosophies of the Roman mind.
Okay, thank you.
That's what he says.
James.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Can you put it back on slide 30? I think there was something there that we didn't get a chance to read. Just 30? Before the, yeah, just one or two before the quotes. One before that.
One before this one? This one?
No, one more.
One before this one?
No, I'm wrong. Okay, I don't see it. That's all right.
You want to talk about the...
I'm thinking about try number... Did you get to 30 or 31? That's
you
30.
Mean
no, 30 or 31.
Epicurean?
No. Well, not before you Epicurus. No, never mind. It's okay.
Okay.
Anyway, I didn't see it. Anyway, I'll try to find it though, because I saw something on there that I liked. I was in a Stoic group in when I lived in Encinitas, California, and one of the guys that came to the group quite a few times was an Epicurean, and it was kind of like hard to figure out like why he was there and why he was lurking around and what he actually believed, And he even had this paper on his personal philosophy that was almost indecipherable. It was Thanatopsis or something like that. He had some kind of crazy philosophical idea which he was dominated by, but he was a nice guy. So, but the thing is I think that Epicurus makes a really serious mistake in combining, in thinking of pain and pleasure as a continuum, when they're really actually the same thing. Pain and pleasure are both the sense of feeling, the idea that we feel good when we taste something or we experience something that makes our skin tingle or have a sexual reaction. Any kind of physical sensation that we have, we call pleasure. And that's what he was referring to. The good taste, the good feelings of drinking wine, all that stuff. This is all what's called pleasure, but this all comes from the nervous system. And he didn't realize that it's exactly the same thing as pain. When we experience too much of any sensation in a part of the body, we experience it as pain, like when we try to eat an ice cube or eat too much eat ice cream too fast, or get struck by something too hard that can cause damage. Then we experience basically the same nerves are just reacting. It's just that the overload in the brain causes the sensation of pain. But he didn't realize it was the same thing. So he believed that if we had too much pleasure, that would be exactly right. If we could just have enough pleasure, there could never be any pain because the pleasure would eliminate the pain. The other idea he had about it that was wrong was that,
James, can I just...
Can you just wait for me, Alan, and maybe put up your hand? Can you learn how to use the reactions button? Thank you. anyway, so the other thing that causes difficulty is the idea that you know that pleasure is going to, which I thought was interesting actually, but he said that pleasures pleasures were, if all pleasures were cumulative, that we had the idea that pleasures could be partially cumulative, but he had this kind of theorem that pleasures, if they all were cumulative, then it would be then all the pleasures would be equal, you know, and of course that they aren't. The pleasures are all experienced a little bit differently. So we can distinguish between pleasures just like we can distinguish with kinds of pain and amounts of pain. So so it's just like, it's kind of like an oversight or a kind of like a naive position that on sensation that is translated into a philosophy, which is then translated into a religion and a cult. So that's all. That's my point.
Okay, so
I'd like to hear other.
Okay, yeah, Ellen, yeah. Ellen, you want to comment?
You're muted. You're muted.
There you go. That button press. It seems to me like you're agreeing, not critiquing the Epicureans. I mean, the fact that pleasure and pain are the same thing doesn't seem to be much different than what Epicurus said. You're just, I mean, you're describing a spectrum and you're describing the pleasure. So I missed how they were different. Can you clarify that? I mean, you're explaining a more detailed physical mechanism of how it works, but other than that, you're getting at the same point.
Well, no, he feels that they're opposed and that he does feel that they're on the same. I think he does agree with you, Alan, that they're on the same spectrum, but he feels that pleasure can eliminate pain, that the absolute constancy of pleasure is the mechanism by which to keep pain from occurring. So then maybe I'm a little, I mean, I find them difficult to understand, and I haven't finished all of the sections that Jason posted, but so I have more to learn about him, just as I do with Democritus. But so I love this meeting. I love what you posted, Jason. It's fantastic. And but in general, I just find myself a little bit kind of well, this is like Dianetics. You know, if you have enough, if you want to survive, you're going to have you're going to have to pursue pleasure and eliminate all those all those painful things. So it's kind of like a false. It's kind of like a false religion, but I won't say it's false. You know, I mean, that's just like a opinionated thing to say, I admit. But it's kind of like a if you believe in these things, then you won't feel any pain because we're just going to have pleasure all the time, and maybe you're just not drinking enough wine, you know, and that'll take care of that'll sort of take care of your misfortunes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, James. Yeah, I kind of have to agree with Alan. Talk about the I just try to find the line. You know, I just cannot find it now. He's talking about. I think that his example is he talked about the pain cannot endure for too long. After you endure for a long time, you just reduce a little pain, right? Your pain drops, then you feel pleasure. So in this sense, pleasure and the pain, so he is different than hedonist. So basics, instead of maximize your pleasure, you should live a very simple life. And then you kind of like, you know, have a lot of friends. That's the way to do it. He talked about the control your desire. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to discuss this one because I think my experience when we talk about Epicureans, that either people like it or people hate it. And then that's an interesting discussion. And then I can see somebody smile, somebody not smile in this way. But I think we will have a chance to talk about that when we talk about the secrets. Okay, so that's another thing, and unfortunately, we probably don't have enough time to go deep on this one. But what we need to know is basics is continue from the atomist, which more, and then go to the Epicurean. And I think
Mark has his hand up.
Mark, yeah. Okay, and let's have a Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, please.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, I think Jason is on the right track. James, I feel like you're confusing Epicureanism with hedonism, which is a very common polemic against Epicureanism. It is true that Epicurus said the only thing that is good in and of itself is pleasure. But Epicurus does not come to the conclusion that you overwhelm pain with more pleasure. They're quite different. Epicurus is the guiding axiom of his philosophy is ataraxia, which is not pleasure per se, it's a lack of pain. Because what Epicurus thinks is that a little bit of pain overwhelms a lot of pleasure. So the best way to feel pleasure is to eliminate pain. So it's a kind of conservative kind of hedonism. And Jason is exactly right. It's almost borders on a kind of asceticism. Epicurus was not about sex and wine and food. In fact, he was quite a modest person. He was asexual. In fact, I believe he said something like, it's essentially impossible for a sexual person to be happy. That's not quite what he said, but he implied that in a certain way. So the ataraxia, which is the lack of pain, is the Epicurean goal, not to overwhelm pain with pleasure. That's a hedonist type of idea. That's my understanding. And I'm pretty familiar with Epicurus. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. James, please.
Yeah, real quick. I think number 6, I think, is a really interesting one for me. In order to obtain security from other people, any means whatever of procuring this was a natural good. So in other words, if you have to prostitute yourself, if you have to kill someone, those are means of obtaining security from other people. So this idea, this concept of security, which is the concept of survival, the same concept in religion. In other words, that in order to survive, well, you need to be religious, you need to be in our religion, or in order to have, for your soul to survive death, you're going to have to find Jesus or something. The idea is that you're going to need to act in the following way, and this idea that any means from any means whatever is a natural good is maybe that's not the meaning of hedonism. That's not what I said. I mean, both you and both Mark and Jason said that I was confusing it with hedonism, but that's not true. Hedonism is a kind of like is this idea that everything has to be for the sake of personal good and personal pleasure. So it's, in other words, everything has to be, all virtue has to be directed towards the self. So I don't believe it is that at all, but it is this idea that everything that maybe it's just a part of hedonism, but everything, in order to survive, you have to be willing to do anything, no matter, and whatever you do is naturally good. It's not bad at all. And that defines the good. So you can quibble over whether this is hedonism or not. That's not what I said, but the fact is that this philosophy leads in a lot of bad directions, and that I think that's clear from what exactly Epicurus is saying.
Okay, so let's make it clear. So basics, Jim, you believe the Epicurean did some bad consequence.
Yeah, it's just exactly like Dianetics. Survival is everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's stop here and without arguing, but that's a good point to argue, in the next one. But we just make sure we agree on this disagreement. I believe some people may believe Epicurean lead to the good result. Some people may believe Epicurean leads to the bad consequence, but you know.
Yeah, I don't want to insult anyone. You know, I'm just stating
we all
my
agree.
opinion.
Yeah, we all been in this meetup for a long time. We all agree. We constantly disagree, and my point is just want to agree on our disagreement, so we can continue on the next discussion. Yeah. So I hope today served the purpose, and my intention is conclude the Greek world. Okay, so the Greek philosophy. So I will take a few weeks, probably a few months break to prepare for the Roman philosophy, because I find out it's quite interesting. And my original plan, I don't think that's enough. So just like I think Mark mentioned, so I kind of put the idea in the Roman philosophy. I think that we will deal with Epicureanism, which some people believe is good, some people believe is bad. And then we have Stoicism, and which is, you know, I don't know if it's really dominant or not, but basically we have a lot of writing about this. And of course, importantly is Neoplatonism, and then Christian world, the Christianity. So basics I try to cover from Leucippus, which is Epicurean, and all the way through St. Augustine and Boethius. Okay, so around the 5th, 6th century, and then we enter the Dark Age. So there's no philosopher to talk about. So that's the idea, but it probably take a while to do it. And during the time, I probably will thinking about doing the reading group. So that's the continue on that. So thank you everyone. And then I think we do it for 10 section, and I think that's good. And then let me stop the recording.
Okay, well, see you next time, Jason.
Everyone, see you next time. And then thank you everyone to join us.
Thanks a lot, Jason. That was fabulous. I learned a lot, especially when your beginning introduction. You said a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know, so that was great. And so did
great, yeah. And then let's enjoy the discussion, and then we will continue. Yeah. All right, thank you. See you. Okay, I watch the post, and I will post soon. Yeah, thank you.